Back here now to start the second segment of the show. The premiere of Hard Knocks, the off-season version, debuted back on Tuesday, July the 2nd, and it's going to continue to be debuted on TV each Tuesday that we go on, I think until July 30th. So this entire month is just going to be filled with following the Giants off-season this year. Because they are celebrating their 100th season this year, so it made sense to follow them, how they maneuvered through the offseason, being filmed from January, to July, and it did work out in a good way for us fans, for an entertainment point of view, that the Giants were involved in a lot of controversial things, a lot of puzzling things, and things that just don't make sense and that require explanations, and you definitely got them in this first episode, because one of the main points that was touched on in the show was that the Daniel Jones situation, coming off an injury, a year removed from paying him a massive contract, and also Saquon Barkley briefly, that I'm going to talk about in this segment in relation to Daniel Jones as well. How both of them are connected and how they have been connected really since last year. It was a tough situation for both of them because the Giants found themselves in a place where they franchise tagged Saquon last year and they gave the extension to Daniel Jones. They gave him a massive contract. I think a $40 million salary is what he's earning right now, and that questionable at the time, but you can understand it because everybody's doing it, and it just goes back to the point I made a few episodes ago that these teams, they're just paying these quarterbacks now because of the fear of not having a quarterback. But more on that in just a few seconds when I continue on with these points. But they paid him, so now this offseason they were in a tight spot to also try and fit Saquon Barkley on their salary cap, because he was obviously going to request a lot, still on his rookie deal, off of a franchise tag. There's no way he would have accepted another franchise tag. So he hit the open market, and don't you know it, he signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. A big slap in the face to New York, but again, it is a business. You keep it professional. If you're Saquon, especially if you're a running back, because of the market, very dangerous waters in terms of knowing when you're going to get another contract like the Eagles offered Saquon. So I don't blame him, but all of New York probably does. They don't feel great about it. Former running back Tiki Barber felt a certain way about it. But that's just the matter of fact. That's just how it all plays out. I think Saquon did the right thing for him, especially at $12 million per year. It was a no-brainer, especially to join, putting all bias aside, putting all loyalty away from the New York Giants. You're joining one of the best teams in the NFC that could arguably give you the best chance to win by adding yourself to that picture. They're a juggernaut now, the Philadelphia Eagles, but how did they get there? How did they get to this point? Well, one of the main pieces of statements that General Manager Joe Schoen made on the first episode was how he was approaching this idea of paying Saquon and how it related to Daniel Jones, really. I want to keep it on Daniel Jones just in this segment. If you look at it, when he mentioned it, I have the quote pulled up here that I wanted to show you guys. When he said it, the first part of it was that you're paying the guy $40 million. That's not to hand the ball off to a $12 million back. And he continued on with that same sentiment to say, this is the year for Daniel. The plan all along was to give him a couple of years. Is he our guy for the next 10 years, or do we need to pivot and find somebody else? So there's a lot of things to unpack there. One, it makes sense. Truly, just looking at the facts, talking financially about the money and how you want to build this team going forward, it does make sense to look at these two situations because of the fact you already paid Daniel. You already made that decision. It's not logical. It's not smart to pay the running back that much money if you want to continue to build this team, get better, add free agents, or make trades like they did this offseason. There's no way they would have added some of the players that they did if they would have been paying Saquon that amount of money. So it makes sense by that standpoint. But they didn't pay the right guy. They didn't make the right decision, because it goes back to that point that I wanted to bring back now. about overvaluing and misevaluating the quarterback position. Because the Giants have been struggling with the quarterback position, because they've been in this just constant cycle of trying to find the guy after Eli Manning, you saw a very bright flash. You saw a very bright moment from Daniel Jones in the playoffs and in that season where you guys got to the playoffs, won on the road, and whether or not you lost to the Eagles by 20, by 10 or 5, you were pretty satisfied with that. But I get it is hard to, pull yourself away from that, and seeing that, how could you not want this guy to continue on your team? But again, if you're comparing Daniel Jones and what he brings to Saquon and what he brings, you're talking about one of the most generational, talented players that the Giants have had on their team in probably since the year 2000, arguably. And especially in such a rough point, what Saquon has done through all those tough times of cycling through quarterbacks, cycling through wide receivers, trying to fix that offensive line, it's a miracle that he has put up the numbers that he has, but it just goes back to his talent and the way that they've surrounded him. No, it's no real surprise that he's gotten injured with the workload that the Giants have put on him. And comparing that guy that has done so much for the Giants to Daniel Jones, just because he's a quarterback, I think the Giants value that more. And it makes sense because he is a quarterback. But there's no way anybody can convince me or just tell me that what Saquon brings and what he's asking for in a contract, there's no way you would still go with Daniel Jones. Even if he's a quarterback, everyone's just so afraid of not having the quarterback, of trying to find their next quarterback, and arguably trying not to pay him that much money. It looks cheap now with Daniel Jones that he's getting paid $40 million, but again, you look at it now, hindsight, most people would want to have Saquon on their team and take the risk of trying to find another quarterback. They probably would have traded up in the draft or would have been more aggressive in the draft, and maybe not drafting Malik Neighbors, but you'd probably go out and be more aggressive to get a Drake May, maybe get J.J. McCarthy at 6. They easily could have done that because he was selected at the 10th pick. So you're handcuffed now, Daniel Jones. You're handcuffed, and that's more so on the Giants. I don't want to make it seem like Daniel didn't pay himself that much money, but because the Giants decided to do that, they had to part ways with Saquon, and now unfairly, fairly, you guys can make your distinction on that, but when getting paid that amount of money at a quarterback position, the expectations now start to roll in, whether you're ready or not. And clearly, I don't think Daniel Jones was ready right away for all these expectations, especially in New York, in that market that is absolutely brutal. If you're not performing well enough, they're going to definitely let you hear about it. So he wasn't ready for it, but it was going to come because you got paid that amount of money, and he just hasn't lived up to the expectations, especially getting picked at 6th overall a few years back now. The Giants have made that mistake of overpaying him and now putting all these expectations on him already, where they clearly didn't have a basis to really go off of that and think confidently that he's going to be turn the corner. He's going to be their franchise quarterback for the next year. Joe Shane even mentioned it in his quote. He said this is the last year for him. This is a big year for him. Is he going to be the guy for the next 10 years, or do they have to find somebody else? They obviously still have questions about it, and not to say that they fully regret giving him that contract, but you can see in that statement that he is not 100% sure that Daniel Jones can be the guy, and that they're almost stuck in a way in this position. And injury problems have been a big issue with that. That's more so on Daniel not staying healthy enough to play in some of these games. The turnovers has been a big problem. Questioning even more why they gave him that deal based on what he's shown you, based on his ability to stay hurt. Arguably a lot like Tua, and you see how much doubt the Miami Dolphins have in giving him that massive contract. But the Giants, I guess serving as an example to the Dolphins, had no real hesitancy to do that, and now it has backfired on them, which you could say is why the Dolphins aren't going right ahead and giving Tua $40 million per year. But on that note, it also does come along with the protection. How good is the Giants' offensive line? And another statement that Joe Schoen made in that in the first episode was, just very exemplified of what I'm trying to bring up with the offensive line. He said he didn't have much of a chance this year. That's legit. The core guys that were going to play together played 60 snaps together. Miami, we got 3 effing practice squad guys playing for us. You could have Patrick Mahomes. He can't effing win behind that. Clearly frustrated, but he makes a good point, Joe Schoen, at the end of the day with the offensive line. It hasn't been great at all, and that goes hand in hand with Daniel Jones arguably getting injured, but the turnovers is another thing. And going off of the point that I made before with the Giants handing Daniel Jones his contract, which I don't think is a good decision or was a good decision. Now the fact that you add on them not being able to build up this offensive line and develop it over and over and over again that they've tried, that again is on them, unfortunately, for not really acknowledging the fact that this offensive line is not ready at all. But regardless of that, you're still going to pay this quarterback $40 million and let Saquon walk out the door because, quite frankly, because he is the quarterback. He's the quarterback. You always need a quarterback to give yourself a chance. But I think teams really need to start reevaluating this approach that just having an average quarterback who you still have a lot of doubts about is not better than a running back with a deteriorating running back market. It might seem expensive, but it isn't worth it. You just have to look more so at the value of the player, regardless of position. I know it's hard because of how everybody talks about the quarterback, but looking at what the player brings to this team is really the biggest point I wanted to make in all of this, and it's crazy. I can't imagine, I'm not a Giants fan at all, and it sounds like I am the way I'm talking about them, but it's just crazy how they've played into that and how they've just gone in on this idea that paying Daniel Jones this much and then thinking that letting Saquon walk away was somehow going to be all right for them, because now they're in a tough situation. Joe Schoen mentioning this is the year for Daniel. This is probably the year for Brian Daboll as well. He's on the hot seat. Arguably for Joe Schoen as well as the general manager, for a lot of guys on that team. So it's a lot going into 2024, and I don't think it's honestly fair to make this year Daniel Jones' last year or have it be a make or break year for him, because they're not ready. They haven't made this team ready. They haven't made the players around him in a ready situation for him to be the most successful. I don't expect it to be any different than it was last year. And if the blame is going to fall on Daniel Jones, which it probably will, he's going to walk away. They're going to trade him or just put all the blame on him, where I think, again, more teams, more people should look at the Giants and how this was really mismanaged from the beginning, making a wrong decision and now having to live with the consequences of it. So that's my outlook, I guess, on the Giants, on where they are right now and going forward into 2024. It's not looking good. I love Malik Neighbors. I thought that was a good decision, but they're just not ready, in my opinion, in a division where they could have had a good chance to compete for because of the Cowboys being the Cowboys and being 50-50, but I don't even think they're that much better at all than the Cowboys. So that's an opportunity missed. The Commanders are taking advantage of it, and the Giants are just going to have to really reevaluate next offseason on what they're going to do moving forward. But that'll be enough on the Giants. I'm going to talk about them more tomorrow and some other interesting quotes that came from the first episode, more so around Saquon and that decision and how they came to that decision. But another segment that's coming up after this break, we're going to talk about my rankings or the teams that are most likely to go from worst in their division last year to potentially competing for that number one spot and taking the division crown in 2024. I went through all 8 divisions and we're going to rank them all 1 to 8. So that is coming up right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Look